Hello and welcome to the Happiness Is podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness is Egg-Shaped, and we have a greatest hits, the Living with the Lions series, the highlights from the Lions that have been on the pod. And do we have a pod for you? John Bentos Bentley, the star of Living with the Lions. If you had it on VHS or DVD like me, or if you're one of the millennials who's now watching it online, it is just joyful. The man scored tries, he kept the spirits high, and you saw how much it meant to him to play for the badge. I feel very honoured to call him a friend. He is daft, but he is magnificent. He's very, very honest. I've had the pleasure of speaking with him. I've listened to him give his speech, and every time it makes me chuckle, even though I know a lot of what's coming. A very good human, and I was delighted when he gave up some time to listen to me. I hope you enjoy his highlights. We also have, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the quiet man, the silent assassin, the man who was given no chance against those giants in the Springbok pack, recently inducted to the Scottish Rugby Hall of Fame, and no one more deserving than Tom Smith for everything that he achieved in his career. He's had some challenges recently. It was so good that he gave up some time to speak to me, and I absolutely loved it. I hope you enjoy listening to Bentos and Tom Smith. I know I enjoyed being there, and I can't wait to listen to them again. Go for it. Your wife gives you a bit of a hard time for only having one story to tell, doesn't she?
Yeah, she tells me I went on one tour, scored one try, and you got one speech. Get over yourself. Come on.
I love it. It keeps you humble. Now that tour, to a lot of rugby union people, they didn't really know a lot about John Bentley, and then by the end of it, we couldn't get enough.
Wow.
It was obviously a special tour, and for me that was a huge moment. I was 17, 18 years old, 97, Doddy Weir, yourself, Rob Howley, Scott Quinnell, even Jeremy Guskett to a certain extent became quite likeable for a Scotsman. Gregor Townsend was a massive hero of mine. What was it like joining that tour party right at the very beginning?
Do you know what, Bruce? It wasn't on my radar. It really wasn't to tour with the British and Irish Lions. I'd been in rugby league for 9 years. I'd initially played with England back in '88 as a 21-year-old on 2 occasions. And I'd gone to rugby league then. And I had 9 years playing professional rugby league. And then I got a phone call. I'd signed with Newcastle in September '96 with Rob Andrew and Sir John Hall's band of brothers. We had an amazing team in the second division, which got promoted and then won the Premiership first time of asking. Fran Cotton rang me January of '97 and said, "Bentos, it's Fran." I went, "Yeah, I know it's Fran." I'd been with Fran at Sale before turning professional with the rugby league. Fran and Steve Smith. And Fran said, "I'm going to come straight to the chase. Are you available to tour with the Lions in the summer?" And I wasn't. Technically, I was supposed to be playing professional rugby league. It was a 12-month contract, 8 months with Newcastle, 4 months with Halifax. But I lied and I said yes. He said, "Well, with all due respect, you're running riot. You're in a great team. We're going to need to get you a run with England A, the second string." And rang me back 3 weeks later and said, "England won't touch you." It comes as very little surprise to either of us. But what I'm telling you is we're watching you. And do you know the significance of '97 as well, Bruce, which probably need to mention is it was the first time that McGeechan was invited. He'd been on the tour in '93, which had been a poor tour really in New Zealand. And he was invited to coach the '97 Lions tour, and he said no. And the reason being is in '93, a committee picked the players, and he took players that he didn't want to particularly take to New Zealand who weren't equipped to play for the Lions. He said, "The only way I'll consider if I pick my coaching staff, and I also get the opportunity to pick the players, we'll get some selectors and we'll pick the players." And that was groundbreaking. And also the fact that, it was professional, but there was so much amateur there. And looking back, we've done lots of work just recently, podcasts and the lads of '97 coming together in the build-up to this tour this year. Everybody talks about our tour being the happy tour, and it was. Traditionally, you've got a challenge with that group of players, Bruce. They can all play, but you've got 4 countries, 3 of which, the Celts, phonetically spelled so incorrectly, Don't particularly like the English, really, if we're honest. And then again, I'm a northern boy. I'm from Yorkshire, and I don't particularly like the English. But we actually decided, we had a really important meeting with a group of players, and we wanted to devise a code of conduct and also recognise how we wanted to be viewed as a group of players. And we agreed for 2 months of our lives to put our differences to one side. And it worked. We became an amazing group of players off the field, which obviously had a great benefit on the field. And you know, incidentally, I know I'm talking a lot here, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But incidentally, we played a style of rugby in '97, Bruce, that we'd never played since. Before, we've never played since. You know, moving the ball away from their strength, which is their forwards, and putting 4 or 5 players behind the ball carrier and playing some rugby. It was amazing.
It was amazing. The whole thing was amazing because it was able to be televised here. There was no time difference, so games happened at kind of suitable times to watch. The Fly on the Wall documentary, I mean, you're probably sick of talking about it, but it never gets old. And I know, I mean, I've watched it so many times and I'll watch it again. I've got absolutely no doubt. But you're the kind of guy that every tour party needs to bring that energy. And you've already said happiness.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting with the film crew because we arrived in Weybridge on the 11th of May 1997. That was the day that my son was 7-year-old. It was his birthday. So I'd had some lunch with him and then I disappeared with Tony Underwood down to Weybridge. 2 little girls, one at 5 and one at 6 months, which was a challenge to leave them, if I'm honest, Bruce, you know, for 2 months. And when we had our first team meeting on the Monday morning, there was a film crew in the corner of the room and they were never introduced. And I didn't realise until later that back in '97, in the build-up to the tour, Geach was told that, and Frank Cotton, the team manager, that there was going to be a film crew going to try to recreate Fly on the Wall. And he said, no, that's not happening. The Alliance, it's not happening. And he was told, basically, he got his own way with picking the players, so he had to deal with the fact that the film crew was coming. And how he chose to deal with them, he ignored them initially. He totally ignored them. And they were never introduced. And do you know what? They were with us throughout the week. They were wearing the kit. And on the Friday night, we all went for a drink together. And do you know the sad part of us all going for a drink together? We only did it on 2 occasions, Bruce. That was the first. And the second was after the 3rd test. Because throughout the tour, the rugby was the priority. There was always somebody preparing for the biggest game of their lives. And the film crew were there. And I said, come on, boys, what are you doing? Why are you here? You've not been introduced. And we won't Fly on the Wall. And I just said, do you know what? You've no chance. There's only a player can get Fly on the Wall, a real Fly on the Wall. And actually, unbeknown to me, they got some portable cameras that they were going to distribute. They were taking away 3. They were going to distribute them to some of the players. And when we arrived in Durban, we went to the gym for the first time. And if you remember the scene in the gym, and I'd spoken to the foundation and said, I don't do weights. I'm 30-year-old, I don't do weights. I've never lifted a weight in my life. I'm not doing them. And he went, well, you've got to come to the gym. And I said, well, I'll come to the gym, but I'll just do a bit of, you know, bit on the bike, on the rower and whatever. And I'd got a knock on my bedroom door, and it was the lad who was running the crew, and he said, Bentos, can I come in? He said, yeah, of course you can. He said, I've got something for you. And he pulled out of the bag this snazzy little piece of equipment, which was, wow, I'd never seen anything like it. He said, it's yours, do what you want with it. And I took it to the gym for the first time, if you recall. I spoke to that lovely girl called Lauren, who was under step, lovely. And then there was a girl, her husband must have been very, very fortunate. She was beautiful. And then there was a big truck on the treadmill, and I just said, here's one for the front 5. So it was fun. You know, it was fun. But Bruce, importantly, it also had to be about the rugby. You know, we were given no chance. No chance. And I promise you, when I rocked up in Weybridge in Surrey, I didn't really think we'd get a shot at the series. I thought we might win 1 test series, really. But actually, by the time we'd boarded the plane and left Weybridge and flew to South Africa, I thought we were in with a chance. I changed my mind.
When you arrived at Weybridge, did you know all the players?
No, I didn't. I knew the Newcastle boys. There were 5 of us: Stimo, Tate, Doddy, Tony. I knew that some of the Welsh boys from the rugby league connection, Scott Quinnell, Scott Gibbs, Alan Bateman, Di Young. The Irish boys are easy. They're really, we're only 4 of them as well. Everybody gets on with the Irish. But the English, I didn't know the English. And I remember asking Tony about some of them and, what about Johnson and what about Delalio? And in particular, I spoke about Guscott. I asked him about Jerry Guscott, and I'd formed a bit of an opinion of Guscott prior to meeting him, which is a mistake, really. But I thought he was a little bit arrogant. He appeared a little bit aloof and arrogant. And he also didn't play in that game when Bath played against Wigan at Rugby League at Main Road, Manchester, and then at Rugby Union in Twickenham. And so I thought he was a bit soft, actually, if I'm honest. And I asked Tony about it, and Tony said, well, Bentos, if he respects you, you'll get on very well. And Tony said he will respect you. And I said, well, you know me, Tony. If he doesn't, I'll pick a tackle shield in training, I'll let him hold it, and I'll throw my arm straight across the top of it, across the bridge of his nose, and we'll gain some respect. And actually, when he came into the room, I'd gone and I was attempting to blend Bruce. And we were all meeting up for the first time. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of energy in the room. And I watched Guscott come into the room. What a presence. What an amazing presence. And he was laughing and joking. And we got brought together. And he put his hand out. I put my hand out to shake his hand. He went, Bentos, I've heard a lot about you. Looking forward to spending some time. And I thought, wow, And what certainly throughout that tour, what I did recognise, he wasn't soft. He was an amazing rugby player. And a player that, during extreme intensity, can still stay up there. When we were in the second test and we were just hanging in there, we were second best at times, well, probably for 60 minutes. He still insisted that we needed to push and keep playing. And he's become a great friend, actually. He's become a great friend. And I do talk about him. I'm sure we'll get into it, but there's an occasion when I scored a try that everybody talks about. And I had an opportunity to come on the passenger, and I didn't. And I ended up getting over the line. And he spoke to me. He spoke to me, he said I should have passed. But do you know what? On the 28th of June, when that drop goal went, that was his moment. And I always remember stood there thinking, and do you know that was, and I'm jumping way ahead now, but that was an amazing moment in my life that we'd been given no chance. We were on the field in the second test, 3 minutes remaining, drop goal goes over, 18-15 we leading. Jenks had kept us in that game. And when the final whistle went, do you know, it was one of the most frustrating moments of my life, Bruce, because there were so many different places I wanted to be at that one moment in time. There was all the boys on the field who had become amazing friends and colleagues. There was the boys who were integral, who sat in the stand, who were a big part of our success. And then, of course, there was my family and all my friends back home, a long way away. And I wanted to share that moment with everybody. And I just remember stopping and thinking to myself, oh, no, why? Why? Of all the people, why did it have to be Guscott?
Do you know someone as a Scotsman, and I've asked Gregor this, why didn't you take that drop goal?
Yeah, he carried the ball into contact, actually.
I know, what the hell was he doing? He should have sat in the pocket and kicked the goal.
Yeah, it was man, really, and he's a great guy. Misinterpreted. People who form an opinion of him, and it's a negative, don't know him. I'm privileged to know him now, and I'm pleased to call him a good friend. And I was wrong about everything I thought about him. He was an amazing rugby and an amazing bloke, actually.
We can't, or I can't move on. A mutual friend of ours, and we won't spend too long on it, but Doddy Weir was fabulous on that tour. Obviously, nobody had ever heard of him, Pumalanga, and hasn't heard of it since. But if you were a rugby supporter, you remember it for pretty dark reasons. And Doddy, I know you've been in touch with him very recently. What a man.
Yeah, crazy. Flawless. And flawless as a human being. I would defy anybody to say a bad word about him. He walks into a room and lights the room up, and he's always been fun. I like to use the word fun. But yeah, it was brutal. Obviously, his tour came to an end. I always remember, because I'd used the camera for a couple of weeks, and I'd said, do you know what, to the boys, why don't I give it to somebody else? You get a different perspective of the tour. Yeah, everybody's relaxing now. They're comfortable with me with the camera. So I gave it to Doddy. And actually, when he got injured, I went to his room to pick the camera up and to say goodbye to him, actually. And I remember going back to the room, and for that one moment, it's the only occasion throughout the tour I wanted to go home. I didn't want to be there. It was like, what's it all about this? And, you know, I laid the pictures of the children out, and I got quite emotional about it, actually. But, yeah, and then, of course, for him to obviously, the tour ended like that. And for the fight that he's got now, it's truly amazing. I mean,
you know, Geach didn't select you, and then he did. So, but your respect for him would help people respect you. So when you delivered something maybe I didn't want to hear, you see that it hurts, but it's delivered from a place of honesty. Did you have to go and just steel yourself a little bit or gather yourself before you went on to the next thing?
Yeah, there was an occasion. There's a standout occasion for me on the tour, actually, and that's evident. We played 13 games, Bruce. There were 35 players vying to play in those games. If you play on a Saturday, every Saturday, you play in the tests. And ultimately, it's all about playing in the tests. Yes, you know, the build-up, we were 8 games prior to the first test, which created a bit of problem on this last tour. They didn't have enough games, really, I don't think, in the build-up to the test series. And as we saw, South Africa hadn't played for 2 years, but got better as the series progressed. I got into the Saturday. So initially, I was picked for the first game, Eastern Province. And I stubbed my toe in training. I couldn't believe it. Stubbed my toe. I had to pull out the game. And then we had a midweek game against Border, and I was still struggling with the toe. And James Robson, the doctor, the Scot, said to me, Bentos, I just need to let you know, if you don't play, we were talking about it on the day of the game, if you don't play this evening, you'll be going home. You'll be on the plane home. So I had a cortisone injection in my toe, and I managed to get through the game, and I got man of the match and all that rubbish. And then ended up playing on the Saturday against James Small, Western Province, which was a big game, and a game that was talked a hell of a lot about in terms of the confrontation that was to be had between myself and James. And then there was a midweek game on Pamalanga when Doddy got injured. And then, of course, there was the Saturday game, which I was picked for. So I'm rolling now. I'm in the Saturday side. 60 minutes into the game, as in as a result of having had a shocker, just a rubbish game, I was off. Scott Gibbs came on, Alan Tate moved on to the wing, Gibbs in the centre mid, just got. And I didn't need anybody to tell me. And the honesty which he spoke about, I knew that I'd be playing the following Wednesday. I knew I would be playing because as a result of my performance. It wasn't good. It was substandard. And do you know what, Bruce? Nobody had to say anything to me. I had to have a good look at myself. I probably went off tour for a couple of days, actually. And I stopped being the one with the camera and the jovial one and all this, that and the other. And I just recognised and I had to have a look at myself about why I was there. I wasn't there to make everybody laugh and be the fun guy and all this rubbish. I was there to play rugby. And I was there to play rugby and try and play in the tests. And as a result, we played against Gauteng Lions at Ellis Park. We ended up winning the game, which was quite a tough game because we'd lost against the Blue Bulls. We were then going to Natal on the Saturday, and then we were into the emergency, and then the first test. So we got the show back on the road, actually. We ended up winning the game, and I ended up... we got a standing ovation as we came off the field for all the players who hadn't played. And I remember shouting, it was back on tour. So that was my show back on the road.
Yeah, that confrontation with James Small.
Yeah.
The media love that stuff. But did that fuel you?
Yeah, brilliant. Loved it. Really look forward to it. There's a lot of chat about James Small in the build-up to the game. With the forwards, with Lawrence Delali or Tim Robb and myself, how we would defend him. Because he was billed as a character who wanted to make it the James Small show. You know, even within the West. And he was a great player. But a bit mixed up. You know, a little bit of a troubled causer, really. The ultimate with the game, he ended up going around me on the short side of a scrum, Bruce. And nothing had happened in the first half. We're not really coming to contact with each other. But early on in the second half, from the base of the scrum, the halfway line, 20 metres infield, he demanded me to see the ball from his scrum half. He's on the right wing, I'm on the left, which I normally played on the right, but was picked on the left to him. Then, due to an amazing piece of wing play on his behalf, and a rather shabby piece of defensive play on my behalf again, he went round me. As I frantically got back to try and get hold of him, he kicked the ball on, it ran on, and it stopped on the try line. I think it was either Jerry Guscott or Neil Jenkins got back and touched the ball down, resulting in a 22-metre dropout for us. As I very embarrassingly made my way back, he came up to me, circling his finger like this, and he'd gone round me. He then went and stood about 30 metres away in anticipation of receiving this ball, pointed to me, pointed to the crowd, pointed back to me, and began to very, well, gesticulate again, very rudely. I dare show you, really, but at this moment, most of this crowd began to chant words to the effect of, James Smalls, I'm going to kick your ass, Bentley. And I admit, Bruce, I did what we've all done at some point, look for a shovel, to dig a hole to climb in and hide. Yeah, I thought if I do it, I'm on the next plane home. I've got to get out, I'm going to fight. Unbelievably. 5 minutes later, based on exactly the same scrum, he had the audacity to demand the ball and go for the same manoeuvre. On this across, I got across a little bit sharper. I took him high, like I like to. He ended up trying to slam the ball into my face. I ducked. It went out of play. We stepped out of the field over the sideline, and I just looked up, and I felt I was out of sight of that camera down the touchline, and our heads just bumped together. And I told him in we had a bit of a scuffle, Bruce, and I told him in no uncertain terms that he was going to not continue to have his own way. Again, about 5 or 6 minutes later, the ball goes up off Rob Howie's boot, comes down, he catches it, I tackle him. Unfortunately, I'm on top of him, Bruce. He can't go anywhere. Fortunately for me, there's 8 big forwards jump on the top of those 2, so nobody's got a clue what's going on. And it kicked off like World War III, honestly. And he can't go anywhere, and he's getting plenty. And the forwards start to pretend to do the usual, splitting it up, but sliding the punching. Basically, to cut a long story short, I know I've rattled on. We won the game. I scored a couple of tries. I went to him to shake his hand after the game, live on television, in front of everybody. He offered me his hand, took it away, and then walked straight past me. And I actually went after him to make him shake my hand. And Tim Robb got hold of my collar and said, Bentos, there'll be another day. But, you know, it's, of course, then he got slaughtered for not shaking my hand, and then accused me on the Tuesday morning of eye gouging, which I didn't. I was in his face. I was all over him, I'll be honest, but I didn't gouge him. And I took it to Fran. It was front page of every national newspaper. And I took it to Fran and showed him. And Fran just looked at it and said, you didn't gouge him, did you? I said, no, I didn't. But I was in his face. He said, well, here's a guy who gets his own way. Didn't get his, came off second best, so. And then just quashed it, and it disappeared. I saw him actually after the first test. I didn't play. I was on the bench, and they were in a bit of a down mood. They'd obviously lost the game at Newlands. And we shook hands, and he apologised, actually, about how it had all get blown apart. So he's sadly no longer with us, is he?
No, and I did wonder if you'd managed to get closure on that with him. So you've got us there.
Yeah, I bumped into him in 2009 as well, in a bar in I can't remember where we were. We could have been anywhere. He was in a bar, and I'd said, "What?" They'd interviewed me. Said, "What if you bumped into James Small?" I said, well, "I'd love to have a pint with him. I'd love to have a chat with him." And I said, "But if he wants to fight, I'm not bothered. I'll have a fight. I'm not going to you know." And we got brought together, and we took hands. We had a chat, and it was awkward. It was awkward, if I'm honest. He wasn't easy to get on with, but he's a great player. And then he disappeared, and and then of course, sadly, I was informed about the circumstance of his death, which is a real shame, really, for anybody.
Yeah. No, it was one of the huge talking points of the tour. So, one of my favourite people you've mentioned, Ian McGeechan, but yeah. I had his sidekick on here, and I've known Jim for a long, long time. What was your relationship like with Jim Telfer?
It was a fortunate one because I didn't work with him. He worked with the forwards. But I remember, do you know what, crazily, I remember the 5 of us, the new boys stood at Kingston Park. We'd been picked, and it hadn't been announced, but I remember Doddy saying, "You wouldn't want to get picked for the Lions." What? Telfer at the helm. And of course, I remember us getting beasted in the scrum early doors, in particular against Western Province. Did a scrum session with the forwards. God, they were dying. They were apps. And I remember laughing to myself, that's why. But I loved Jim. I loved him. And do you know what? I didn't spend much time with him in terms of his coaching prowess, which is, he was amazing for that job. God, he told them to put the differences to one side and their egos. He was the boss. He was the alpha male. And there was a particular session where he laid down the law and he killed them. And they did adhere to everything he said. But I used to sit with him on his own from time to time. We used to have a coffee or a glass of orange, and we used to talk about life and about family. And what a lovely man. What a hard man, but what a lovely man. I loved him to bits. And, you know, probably the biggest speech I've ever heard was on the 28th of June when we were about to play the second test, and Geach spoke about the challenge, and he knew what it was like because he'd been there in '74. But in particular, he didn't really speak much about the rugby. We were obviously 1-0 up. But he spoke about the people we were sat amongst and the family and the people who would allowed it to be where we was for that day. And he said, you'd be stood on the field today and they knew this. It might be 10, 15, 30 years' time, you know, before you see each other. And having been on the field alongside each other where you can't speak, and it'll just be a look. You won't need to say anything. Oh, it's so true. And I tell you a funny account. I always remember going into Hong Kong, which I used to go all the time to Hong Kong. I remember bumping into Martin Johnson, who was an amazing leader. Very quiet man, actually, initially. Didn't say much. He was a young captain, but he was a big guy, had a great presence. And they wanted a big guy to stand in front of Teichmann, who again was big himself. And John had gone on a week's trip to Hong Kong to do some speaking, but he'd taken 5 of his pals from his little local club who played rugby, but not to any high level, and they'd hired a facility on Wang Chai. These lads, there are a couple of them experiencing everything that's good, possibly bad, about Wang Chai. And I remember seeing John, and we'd gone to do an event on the Tuesday evening with a bunch of solicitors and what have you. And all his mates were like really giddy about them being in Hong Kong, what have you. I'd just come there from Manila. That's why I'd been in Manila for the week prior. So I was a bit dusty, would you say. And I remember seeing John on. We walked, and he has a little bit of a swagger, and he swaggered across and put his hand out and bent across with a like shy half smile on his face. And I knocked his hand out of the way and craned his head down and gave him a big kiss on his cheek and a cuddle. I swear, he looked as though I'd fisted him. He felt so uncomfortable with that. Honestly, it was unbelievable. But all his mates laughed. But I do that. And you know the business with Doddy, don't you? I always tell him I love him. He never tells me. He sends me texts, but he'll never tell me in front of people. I'm quite open with it, Bruce. I've always been like that. I'm comfortable with displaying it. And for me.
Well, I feel very honoured because I've got pictures. I've got evidence of you giving me a kiss, so I'm well aware of that, and I've got evidence to prove it. Bentos, I absolutely love talking to you, and you've been all over. Now, one of the things I'm learning the more I do this and speak to people have only got the capacity to remember maybe 4, 5, 6 results in their life. Yeah. Yet we put so much stock in winning. Yeah. But the things we remember are feelings and people and moments. Who or what or when is the one that maybe you were just in that utopian state of this? There's nowhere else in the world I would rather be right now.
Probably the 28th of June, 1997, although I contradict myself because I wanted to be in so many places, didn't I? But it was that one moment. It would just be nice if I could have had some of those people around me to share that experience. But it was that achievement of winning that second test, having been given no chance. We were given no chance, seriously. And we were second best for a good 60 minutes of that game. But that one moment when you thought, wow, this is, you can't get better than this. It can't possibly get better.
And is that then the evidence of what Geach said? It's creating those memories that then in 30 years' time, you'll just remember.
You know, I think the significant thing about 97 is it was the advent of professionalism. You know, I was paid. I got some money. Lions. You'd chew through your arm, wouldn't you? God, couldn't believe it. But they were actually talking about whether or not there was a place for the Lions in the professional era. Well, if you then look at 2001, that was a pretty ordinary tour. Graham Henry lost the changing rooms a little bit. It became a bit of a drag. 2005, wow. Clive nearly destroyed the concept of what the Lions is all about. Tried to treat them as the England team, and it doesn't work with the Lions. It's a special brand. It's a special way to bring the people together. And then 2009, back on track in South Africa. 2013, a win for Gats in Australia. And then quite an extraordinary result in New Zealand in 2017. The Lions is massive. It's absolutely, it's one of the biggest brands in world sport now. And the amount of supporters that travel. That'll have been extremely challenging this time for the boys. It'll have been crucial that they got on a group of players. And I think they did. They appeared to do so, didn't they, Bruce, from what we saw. But there were no supporters there, and they were in a bubble all the time. I think it's a shame for them that they didn't have the experience that we've had previously. So, but it's, being on 2025, it's back to Australia.
And you're a really rare breed. You're a Scotland test lion. There's not many of you around. I think there are more pandas in Scotland than there are test lions. So how was that? Was that important, do you think, for Jim to have some of his foot soldiers in the camp?
No, I don't think so. I think it has to be. I think one of the things that Jim Geach and Fran Cotton as a group bring to the table and brought to the table is whoever goes on that plane has to have a chance of getting in the test team, and that philosophy was stated from day one, and they backed it up, and I was fortunate enough to get in the team. And sometimes on a trip like that, it is you can be in the right place at the right time, and there are a couple of games that I was probably lucky not to be involved in, and then suddenly momentum gets behind you, and people start talking about you as a test player, and then off you go. But it was a great trip, and it was on the social side and everything. It was kind of almost like marked the end of amateur rugby in a way. There were lots of mixing and socialising with supporters, and South Africa is a pretty good place to go and play rugby, and hopefully this summer it will be the same. I'm hopeful this time we'll get one or two Lions from the Scotland team.
Certainly hope so.
Yeah.
And how did you find out? Because I love these stories of how did you find out you'd got into the Lions squad?
I think I got a call from a journalist. I was completely unaware of the announcement or anything. Nowadays it's on Sky News, and it's a big thing. And back in the day, you'd get a letter through the post, and that was it. It was okay, fairly quiet. There wasn't this social media thing that if you weren't watching TV, that was it. You didn't know. I didn't know what a mobile phone was back then, so it was just if I happened to be at home and the phone rang, I'd answer it. So it was. It's difficult to explain. I didn't start. That was my first season playing for Scotland, and I started the first game. I was on the bench, and I had no awareness that this tour was going on. I was the selection just kind of just happened that way. And later, talking to Jim, he mentioned he'd seen me at the Melrose Sevens a couple of years before, and said that was one of the moments where I'd come into his consciousness in a way, and that was maybe again right place at the right time.
So you then get to go with the Lions, and talking of rare breed, but also Geach and Jim Telfer as the coaches. You've got Gregor and Rob Wainwright and Doddy, and things were looking pretty good. How did the Scottish boys respond to what happened to Doddy?
I think they were the same as everybody. It was in the game. I didn't see it happen in the game, so we came off, and there was something obviously brewing, and I think the president of Mpumalanga, the team we played, in the press conference tried to defend his actions. So there was a lot of anger, and it took a while. Like I said, these things would be all over social media very quickly nowadays. We didn't get to see actually what had happened until a day or so later. But we knew something pretty awful had happened, and pretty horrific. But it was just a huge disappointment. I think to get that far, and I think he was certainly in the frame for a test spot. The way he was playing, in fact, to have it ended in that way was just a shame.
Who on that tour did you meet? I won't go for the dirt, so I'm not going to ask you to dish dirt on anybody. Who did you go on that tour and you didn't know, or you had already had an idea of them and it changed positively? Or who did you go on that tour with and you became mates with and you didn't see it coming?
I think the nice thing about Lions Tour, I think I've said this before, is you make Geach said it in the first test in the pre-match chat the night before. You'll make friends for life. You may not see each other for a few years, but you'll kind of have that connection. And from time to time you'll bump into each other at a dinner or some sort of charity event or anything. And I made just lots of friendships like that. In a way, I may surprise you to hear this, but I keep myself to myself, and just sort of quietly try to get on with things. So, but I'm still in contact with quite a lot of guys from that trip, and I'm fortunate to have done it. So, naming names, I don't know. I think it was a very united, sociable tour, and a lot of good people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people's moment. The Living with the Lions DVD, and now it's on whatever streaming site. It's watched a lot because it was the first really of its kind. But everybody watched it and thought, that looks like a whole heap of fun. They're having a drink, they're arsing about. John Bentley's doing that. They're doing the court session. It's almost a different world for a lot of pros now, and a lot of professionals now are desperate to go and play for the Barbarians because that's where they kind of maybe see that as an outlet. What was the difference between 97 and 2001?
I think obviously the game was 4 years longer into professionalism. I think the philosophy was slightly different, and this is not necessarily a criticism of the coaching or the management. I don't think they were as tight as Jim, Fran, and Geach. I think it's difficult to match that level of trust and self-awareness that they had. But I think also the one thing you can't do on a Lions tour, and I think it's a mistake that's been made again since then, is pick your team before you get out there. Have an idea of your test team. I think it's you have to go with a very open mind. I think one of the really important things about 97 was you'd get up after a game on a Saturday or a Tuesday or Wednesday, and you'd train the next morning with the team playing the next day, and you'd hold bags, and you'd your body was hurting, but in 2001 we almost became two separate sides in a way, just a weekend team and a midweek team, and there was movement between the two teams, but we, there was unity and cohesion amongst the players, but it felt different, and that we're forgetting that it was the finest of fine margins that cost us the win on that trip. In the second test, we were well up at half time, and really we should have won, but these are the marginal gains, I guess, and the smallest of details can change everything. And the tour is, had that second test gone to plan, or had we won that line out in the last test, we'd be remembering the tour very differently.
Yeah.
So
the other bit to the 4 years that's passed, yourself and Paul Wallace, everybody at the moment is picking their Lions team. So after every Six Nations weekend, Jeremy Guscott and Will Carling and Scott Hastings have picked their Lions 15 in that moment, which is really just for show and for social media, because there's so much water to travel under the bridge between now and then. You and Paul Wallace probably wouldn't have featured in many teams in the run-up to it, but you absolutely proved yourself in the moment, and the bits that didn't happen in the 80 minutes obviously counted as well. Jim Telfer and Ian McGeechan knew you and worked with you, and Paul Wallace had done. So by the time 2001 came along, surely you were a shoo-in to start for the test team.
But it shouldn't be that way. It should be, the reality, as we've seen in this Six Nations, that there are some very good players who haven't found form, and some other players who've come from nowhere to be the form players of the tournament. So I think in that respect, obviously good players will always be good players, but you want your good players to be on form. So there has to be that open-mindedness in selection, and that's where you look at what is a fairly young Scotland team, and you think there's several players in that group that you think if they got into the Lions environment, they got the chance to improve. Yeah. They would improve very quickly, and it's just getting on that flight fit and getting the opportunity.
And is that what happened to you in '97? Did you get better because you were in that environment?
Yeah, I think so, without a shadow of doubt. And I think anyone who's done a tour of that length, so we're talking 7-8 weeks, and you play that often and train that often, you just get that match hardness and that fitness, and you reach a new level. And I think as a relatively young player, suddenly being thrown in the mix and surrounded by these players that I've been watching for the last few years on TV and on the Lions tour before, and you have to step up, and if you don't step up, it's a tough place to be.
What was the come down like? You've just beaten South Africa in South Africa. When you got home and started to train and play again, was there a bit of a this is not the Lions?
Do you know what? I didn't. I got back from the tour, and I didn't play for the most of the next season. I had a problem with my it seemed to be a problem with my pelvis. It turned out to be a hernia, and it just took a while to sort out. So I mean, you've got to remember, these are back in the days with they had these hydraulic scrum machines. They used to have one on the wall at Murrayfield, and it had, instead of just like a normal floor, they had these rubber coated metal bars. So it was pretty much 100% grip, and you'd pack down against this machine. You'd push it in, and then it would push back at you. And more often than not, it would be someone, Jim or Richard Dixon, and they'd just pull down this lever, and the machine would just squeeze you back slowly. And you've got second rows and everyone squeezing one way, and the machine pushing you back. And this machine is not going to lose. And we had the same sort of machine in South Africa. So before each scrum session, we drilled down these spikes into the ground. They went about a foot into the ground, and so the machine was, it wasn't really going to move very much. And again, it had the same hydraulics, so you'd push in and then it would push back. And I think a few of us suffered a few issues after the trip, but I think not long after that, the machine got taken off the wall at Murrayfield, and it's probably in a dusty cupboard somewhere at Murrayfield.
Yeah, I still can't understand why you'd want to do that. But when you stuck your head in a scrum against South Africa, and Jim had up the headlines and told everybody what they were going to do to the scrum, and he almost took it personally, as Jim did often with those kind of things. I mean, by rights, you guys shouldn't have done what you did to a South African scrum. But was that where you draw on all that education from Danny and Clubland and what you'd done, and you knew that if he does that, I'm going to twist him here, or I'm going to just get into him there, or I'm going to tickle him here?
I think that, I mean, the first scrum of the first test I remember the feeling of shock, and we had a little chat as a front row afterwards, and it was because we went back about 5 meters, and they really smashed us, and I think we were probably fitter than them, and I think that's often underestimated at scrum time. If you're too tired to scrum, then you can't scrum. So, but no, technically, we didn't do that much analysis of our opposition back in those days. It was more concentrated on ourselves and what we were going to do, and hence the 100 scrum sessions at the back of Loftus Versveld, and just again getting that tightness and that buy-in from everybody that actually this was not going to be a weakness because just because they say it's going to be a weakness. I guess in some ways there are some parallels between playing South Africa then and now. If you look at the Springboks, they're a team that looks to physically dominate, of kicking, strong set piece, and really good defence. Now, I guess we can say we're going to beat them at their own game and kick a lot, have a really good kick chase, and get our defence right. Or we can say we're going to try and speed up the game and play at a higher tempo. And I'm hopeful that we go for the latter, because I think that would favour Scotland players, rather than saying we are going to pick the 8 biggest forwards we can and let's try and match them physically, but also beat them on the mobility and the actual rugby side of things. But it's an interesting philosophical decision for them to make.
Yeah, and it's taken up hours and hours of everyone's time about what that's going to be. How did it feel as the prop at the end of a game? First test, second test, the backs are jumping around, hugging each other. Can you remember, is it hindsight, do you remember what was it like in that moment when the final whistle went? Were you able to jump up and down, or were you just absolutely done?
I think, after the second test, of all the big games I've ever played in, that's probably the game I feel like we've been most dominated in by the opposition. We're chasing shadows for a lot of the game, just defending, and just hanging on in there. So I think everyone was pretty tired. But I think, a lot of things in sport, and I guess in life, take a little while to sink in. And I think it's retrospectively, you kind of look back, and I think after that second test, a lot of the players got a bit of a sickness bug. There was we had a tough weekend up in it was back at where was it? Near Mpumalanga in a hotel in the middle of nowhere, and it was where the All Blacks stayed before the '95 World Cup final, actually.
So it's got previous.
It had previous, and everybody got a bit. I think just the emotion and the physical exertion took its toll, and we were running on empty in that last test. But I think that's something Geach and Jim had talked about, that if you want to win in South Africa, you need to win the first 2 otherwise winning 3 is going to be tough. And I think they're right, and I think that probably goes for this next trip as well.
When you look back, and you mentioned being in North Queensland and complaining about things, and then now that you look back, you think how ungrateful maybe I felt. When you were in those moments in South Africa, and apologies for harping on this, but this is one of my favourites, and I wish I'd been there and all those kind of things, but I've watched that documentary 150,000 times and I'll watch it again. Were you able to enjoy it? Did you know, we see the speeches and we get built up and ready to go out and battle, and we're just sitting on our couch. But were you able to sense the enormity of what you were doing and how long lasting that was going to be?
I think before the trip, I was definitely aware of the questions were being asked about whether the Lions had a place in pro rugby and where that place was and how it would work and how important the tour was. But I think, you know, in the moment, I remember just the absolute terror, sitting on the bus going to the first test, just thinking to myself, you know, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Why am I doing this to myself? It was. I think it's something most rugby players can relate to in terms of that fear of failure before a game, and then the whistle goes, and it all disappears. But I had a little routine before. I'd walk around the pitch and had a little warm up routine before we started the games. But I think I was consumed in some ways in that moment by the enormity of what failure would mean for me personally, and the pressure to perform. So I guess it's looking back now that you enjoy it in a way. At the time, it was just you don't cock it up. And, I think it was, yeah. And I would say it would be the same running out for the Northern Midlands in 1995 in a game against Edinburgh. It would be any game was the same. And I think if you don't have that, then you need to find it in a way that, and maybe, with hindsight, I would maybe learn to challenge it into more positive things. But I guess that's what made me tick. Of
all the games that you played, what's the one that sticks out above all? If you could only keep one, what would it be?
I think probably the first test, 97. I think just in terms of the way the game, the expectation, the pressure before the game, and the way we finished with it finishing so strongly, that I felt almost if we had another 10 minutes on the clock, we would have scored another couple. And it was just a combination of relief and exhilaration, and just the culmination of, lots of hill runs in Dundee, lots of hard nights against Danny Errington, lots of days at Stumel, Watsonians, and I think it was all worth it.
I love it. And thank you for listening and watching the greatest hits with the Living with the Lions superstars. How good to hear from these men with their stories of that tour and what they've done since then. How much the badge meant to them, those speeches, those moments, those people, those relationships made, those experiences shared, and they're still willing to talk about it today. I absolutely loved it, and I hope you enjoyed it too. If you'd like to listen to more, you can catch us on Acast, Spotify, and Apple. Please check out the back catalogue. You can also watch on YouTube and Facebook if you'd like to see what's going on. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I look forward to what's coming in the future. We've got some big names lined up. I hope you're going to be there with us too. In the meantime, my name's Bruce Aitchison, and my happiness is egg-shaped. Stay safe.